All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We are here on the third hearing on the application of ES3LP regarding the parcel of ground known as the Ardrossan tract. My name is Bill Bola. I've been appointed by the commissioners as the hearing officer for this conditional use application. Before we go into testimony, and that will be the cross-examination of the traffic engineer, Mr. Richardson, as I understand it. There is an additional hearing officers exhibit, which I am marking and receiving into evidence right now, which is a list of the members of the Radnor Taxpayers Association that have been provided, that has been provided by their attorney, Mr. Ardrossan, in response to the request from Mr. Snyder to do so. And I understand both Mr. Snyder and Mr. Rice have copies of that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Then further housekeeping is this hearing will go till approximately 10 o'clock tonight. We'll take a break somewhere about halfway through. And right now we have scheduled 2 further hearings in the future, both beginning at 6:30 p.m., and that would be November 14th and November 21st, 2014. All right, anything else from the parties or the council? Okay, very good. Then, Mr. Richardson, let me remind you, you're still under oath from the last proceeding. And Mr. Rice, I think you were about to step up to cross-examine.
Thank you, Mr. Bola. Mr. Richardson, last month, I have some questions just generally about your traffic study and then some specifics about the TIS, which is dated July 26, 2013. Mr. Snyder asked you some questions about the traffic counts. And do you have the transcript of your testimony in front of you by any chance?
I do.
Okay. I'm just going to paraphrase some of the discussion and some of your testimony. Mr. Snyder asked you about taking the traffic counts during the summer months.
Page?
And that starts on page 165.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so you testified last month that you took the traffic counts in July of 2013, correct?
Correct.
And then on page 166, line 14, you said in response to a question from Mr. Snyder about the PennDOT factor, you testified that we felt that the analysis using the specific traffic volumes we felt were appropriate using when you compared to the PennDOT's numbers. Now that PennDOT number or PennDOT factor is a statewide factor that PennDOT uses. Is that right?
No, it's for specifically the roadways in the around the vicinity of the project site. It's specifically Darby, Paoli Road, and Newtown Road.
So PennDOT has because on page 168, you testified you talked about adjusting the counts that were made in July by a certain percentage, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then at line 5, you said, we looked at it, we increased the volumes at the intersection by 5%, which is typically what you would see in any kind of seasonal variations. And then 5% is usually accepted as the norm for seasonal adjustment. You typically won't see anything that high. We feel that is really on the worst case condition side. And my question is about that 5%. Where is that 5%? Is that a published PennDOT factor?
No, that's a factor that I, as a traffic engineer with over 20 years of experience in this region, has seen traffic counts collected in the summertime as well as in the non-summertime months. And my opinion was that the 5% would be representative of any seasonal variations between those time periods.
Okay, so that's your best opinion as a traffic engineer, 5%?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So I'm still a little confused about your testimony regarding the PennDOT factor on page 165. What is the PennDOT factor, and where do I find that published?
The PennDOT factor is essentially, if you were to go onto PennDOT's website, and it's called the I, and it's lowercase I, capital T, capital M, capital S. And this is PennDOT's database for traffic counts that they continuously collect on their roadways. We obtained information from the website, and those counts are continuously updated. There's a cycle that they do the traffic counts in this area. The counts were 2010 for Darby-Paoli Road. However, PennDOT will adjust those yearly by a seasonal, or what they call a background growth rate to represent existing conditions. When you refer to the information that they provide, they give you information for daily volume. The factor that they use, that I referred to in my testimony, was the peak hour factor that they provide. And basically what that is the percentage of traffic that was detected on that particular roadway during that count. And what that number was for Darby-Paoli Road specifically, and the reason why I'm choosing that road is because that is the road where the bridge is out, was around, depending on which section you looked at, was 12 to 13%. So what that tells you is that 12 to 13% of the daily volumes that were traveling down that road occurred during the peak hour. So what I did was I took that average daily traffic volume, which was over 6,000 vehicles, multiplied it times to 12 to 13%, and that gave me a peak hour number. And a peak hour, again, is the 1 hour time period in the morning or the evening with the highest traffic volumes. It's 4 consecutive 15-minute periods. And when I compared that number, the PennDOT number, multiplying it times the peak hour factor, what we call the K factor, it compared favorably with the traffic counts that we obtained in July of 2013. So therefore, based on data collected by PennDOT.
When did they collect that data?
The volumes that they collected were the year 2010.
Okay.
And again, those numbers are adjusted yearly to represent existing conditions.
But they're adjusted, they're not, when you say PennDOT continuously does counts, they did it in 2010, and that's what you relied on. They didn't do counts in 2011, 2012, or 2013, correct?
Correct. But my experience has been that PennDOT will increase the traffic volumes regardless if there's any growth in the area anyway. And in my experience in the last 2 to 3 years, based on the economy, the lack of building in this region, southeastern Pennsylvania, that a lot of traffic volumes have actually gone down on the majority of the state highways. For several reasons, but mainly because of the economy.
So do you know what month PennDOT took those counts in 2010?
I do not.
Okay. So you took this in, you did your counts in July 2013. Obviously, schools are not in session in July.
Correct.
Okay. Do you know how many schools, high schools, colleges, universities are located in Radnor Township?
Not specifically, but I know that there are a number of schools, college, high schools, academies.
Okay. So you don't know whether there's 2 or there's 15?
I know there's more than 2.
Okay.
Okay.
So is that something that PennDOT considered, do you know, in 2010?
Their numbers are strictly raw data that they collected on their roadways.
Okay. And we don't know what month they collected their data, right? We just,
I do not know.
okay. So,
That information is not provided.
I mean, but you'd agree that you'd get a more valid traffic count if it was done during some month when schools are actually in session, correct?
Without having done counts when schools are in session, I can't say that for a fact. that has been historically correct. If schools are located nearby, volumes tend to be higher. However, again, I did an analysis that included a 5% growth, not ignoring the fact that the schools were not in session. And the volumes and the analyses showed nearly the same results as the numbers based on the summer counts that we conducted.
Okay, but they're estimates, and there's a bridge out now in that area, so there's no good way to get accurate counts until that's all corrected, correct?
There is no way to get counts that would be representative of the traffic patterns in the area until the bridge is back in place.
Okay. And the counts were done when school was in session. That would give us some more better accurate information.
Well, we could surely make a comparison, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will definitely be higher.
You talked about in the study on page page 1 of the TIS.
What's that exhibit number, Mr. Rice?
That's
19.
MT 19.
Okay, thank you.
And you testified during the hearing about the 5 new driveways, or 5 driveways to Newtown Road, and the 5 driveways to Darby Paoli Road. On page 1 of MT 19, you talk about the 10 driveways on the 2, and they're both state roads, correct? Newtown Road and Darby Paoli Road?
Yes.
They're both state roads, okay. So, but on page 1, you talk about those 5 driveways, and you're referencing lots. Those lots are, they're, on the current plans, they're not numbered 45, 44, 45, 46. They're numbered 4-4, 4-5, 4-6, et cetera, right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Just want to clear up, make sure we got accurate information. So you talk about those driveways there, and then in the executive summary, you talk about the driveways also, which is on page I, before page 1 in the study. And in your executive summary, your suggestion is that all of those entry points could require a PennDOT HOP, correct?
If application is made to PennDOT for those particular driveways, yes, they would be reviewed by PennDOT.
Because they're all either, they're going to be new entries onto a state highway, or they are existing driveways onto a state highway that will service new development, right?
Well, there are some of the driveways on each roadway that will remain in the same location and remain to serve the existing houses that are there. There are 2 new driveways proposed on Newtown Road, and there are, just to make sure and the driveways onto Darby Paoli are existing driveways also.
So there's only 2 new driveways proposed?
That's 2 new driveways on Newtown Road, and 2 driveways, or there's 5 driveways on each roadway, and there's 2 new driveways on Newtown Road.
Yeah,
Right. So
that's what the plans would show. Mr. Bola, if you want me to point the 2
No,
new
no,
ones?
I just
Okay.
want to make sure I understand. So there will be 10 driveways, 5 to each road, and only 2 of those total of 10 will be new driveways.
Correct.
All right, will they require the HOP?
The driveways on Newtown Road, the driveway to the manor house, or the main house, that is going to be changed from a entrance only, and there's the driveway that's going to be changed to an exit only. Those technically should have a highway occupancy permit. The new driveways themselves would definitely require new permits, and it's questionable whether the other driveways will require new permits.
For
I'm,
this,
I'm going to ask Mr. Richardson to identify every one of these. So, I mean, I think that'll clarify
All right, great.
for me and for the record and for the public what we're talking about. And
Okay.
Mr. Snyder can certainly be the pointer as we do this.
okay, that's fine, I'll do it that way, because
so
I think there's a different number. Go
If
ahead.
if we start, Mr. Richardson, on the plan as it's shown, and I guess this is the front sheet of MT16 that we're
Correct.
looking at.
Correct.
Mr. Snyder's pointing to a new road, not a driveway, a road, which will service those units that are in the upper northeast corner of the property, correct?
That's correct.
And that will require a PennDOT HOP permit for that road, correct?
Yes, that would be classified in PennDOT's terminology as a low-volume driveway.
Okay, so as I head down Newtown Road towards Darby Paoli, there are two entrances onto Newtown Road that constitute the existing driveway into the main house, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and Mr. Snyder's pointing to those two, and they are both existing driveway entrances onto Newtown Road, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now will they require a new HOP or an HOP? Or is that up to PennDOT to decide?
They are currently low-volume driveways today, and those two particular driveways will serve 28 homes. So therefore, those driveways will require a new permit.
Okay. So that's three. Now, is there another driveway that comes into the pod of homes in the upper northeast corner of the property? And if so, can you identify where it is?
Yes, Mr. Snyder is referencing, it's equidistant between the eastern property line and the intersection of the site driveway that lines up with Abrams Lane. And that will serve one lot.
Okay, which lot is that serving?
According to the plan, it's 2.5, 2-5. I need, okay. Thank you.
Okay, and the plan shows 2.5 being about a 42,000 square foot lot. Does that contain an existing structure or house on it?
Yes,
Okay. So that driveway, is that an existing driveway?
that is an existing driveway, yes.
Okay. And that's going to continue to service the one house, is that right?
Yes,
Okay, so as I head back down Newtown Road towards Darby Paoli, then there's a new road that is proposed to be cut into Newtown Road that'll service the lots on the upper northwest corner of the property, correct?
correct.
And that will require a PennDOT HOP permit for that, is that right?
It will, yes.
Okay. For these, for the two new roads and what are essentially three driveways, did you analyze the site distance in there for the existing driveways and for the proposed roads?
I did.
On MT19, your study, you've got Table 4, which is a site distance analysis. And you have Table 5 and a 6 and a 7, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, the site distance analysis under Table 4, you describe as the new easternmost site driveway to Newtown Road. Is that the new road that's coming in the upper right-hand corner of the property?
It is.
Okay. So, you analyze that with a posted speed limit of 35 miles an hour, is that right?
Correct.
And and I'm just reading across the top of the table, exiting movements to the left and to the right. DES, that's
Desirable site
PennDOT
distance.
desirable site distance, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so PennDOT would like to have 440 feet there. The acceptable site distance, the SSSD, is 245, and your report says the existing site distance there, both to the left and to the right, is 500 plus, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so did you actually go out there and measure the 500 feet?
Yes.
Okay. Is it 501 or is it 591? Do you know?
Once we get to a point where it's beyond the desirable site distance, we typically do not go beyond that.
Okay.
There's no need. We exceed that number.
Okay, so, but your testimony for those two movements is 500 plus, and then underneath that, the other two movements, entering left turns, you have as existing 400 plus. And is that with clearing vegetation or anything else out of the way? Or is that for those two site distances?
Those numbers are based on the site distances that are out there now without any removal of any obstructions.
Okay. Now, the township's traffic engineer issued a letter, which I believe you received a copy of, correct?
Yes.
And she made a general comment about site distances and the need to do an engineering study to determine whether or not the 85th percentile speed of the roadway is higher than the posted speed limit. Do you recall that
Yes.
letter? Okay. So what does that mean?
The township engineer traffic consultant is asking for confirmation that the posted speed limit is the appropriate speed to be used for the analysis. That's our interpretation of that comment.
Okay, so she wants to confirm that people aren't traveling in excess of 35 miles an hour on a regular basis, right?
Correct.
And if they are traveling, and this 85th percentile speed of the roadway is an engineering study, you'd actually determine how fast are people going, regardless of the posted speed limit, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if they're going faster than 35 miles an hour and they meet this standard, then the site distance requirements would change, right?
Only for the safe stopping site distance.
Okay. But it could be larger. It's not going to be any less, but it could be a greater distance for that site distance, right?
Well, we don't know that. But one thing I have to say is that the procedures that we have followed in the traffic study are what PennDOT requires. And they do not require us to analyze anything less than 35 or 9 miles per hour over the speed limit. We looked at it from the aspect, and we have had subsequent discussions with the township's traffic consultant about actually having to go out and do what we would, to determine 85th percentile speed, you would have to do a radar study. And we discussed it with Ms. Kaminsky, the township's traffic consultant, that it was our opinion that if you were to increase the speed by 10 miles per hour to 45 miles per hour, we still would be in compliance with the minimum site distance that would be required. So therefore, based on that conversation, Ms. Kaminsky agreed that we did not need to go out and do a follow-up traffic study for that.
Okay, was this after she released her
It was,
her
yes.
review letter in
Yes,
August?
Yes,
Okay.
and we have not provided any formal response, but once we move further into the process, we will formally respond to all of these comments. And just as a side note, we believe we can comply with all of these comments that are in this letter, and we will revise the traffic study where necessary to satisfy the township's consultants' concerns.
Okay, maybe what I ought to do, Mr. Bowl, is mark this letter as T1.
T1, Township 1. I'll mark it and reference it for the record. All right, I am marking as T1 a memorandum from Gilmore and Associates, Inc., Engineering and Consulting Services, dated August 28th, 2013, authored by Amy Kaminsky, P.E.
Okay, Mr. Richardson, you have this, what's been marked as T1, is that right?
I do, yes, sir.
Okay, so that, the comment we just discussed is on page 3, under number 5, site distance, the discussion about the 85th percentile speed?
Yes,
Okay. So that would apply to all of these Newtown Road driveways and the 2 new roads, correct?
correct.
Okay. And it's your view that, well, let me just back up. So your site distance is based on the posted speed limit, which for all these is 35 miles an hour. Did you say +9? Is that what?
Yes, and the reason why I say +9 is PennDOT usually requires, if they feel that the speeds are over 10 miles per hour, they will require you to do the radar study and confirm with them also when upon application for the permits themselves.
Okay. I want you to identify, if you could, we can go through this, the driveways onto Darby Paoli. You didn't do any site distance analysis, at least in your report on those driveways, did you?
Not in the report, no.
Okay. So, well, let's just identify, if we can first, the 5 driveways and what lots they're proposing to serve from the site onto Darby Paoli Road, which is also a state road, correct?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. It looks to me like there's a driveway currently servicing Lot 5-1.
Correct, and I have it in the study as serving Lot 44.
Okay.
When I reference, as you noted, my designations do not match the plans.
Okay, so 5-1, and the plan as it's proposed, that driveway would serve that one lot only, correct?
As it exists today, yes, it would only serve one lot.
Okay. Did you do a site distance study there at all?
We did look at the site distance at all of the driveways, but since those were existing driveways, that's one of the reasons why we didn't include it in the study. If we alter those driveways in any fashion, PennDOT will require a new permit for those driveways. So
Okay.
we felt we weren't altering those driveways, so therefore we didn't need to include it in the study.
Okay. As we go down Darby Paoli Road south then, there's a cluster of buildings which includes lots 5-2, 5-3, 5-4, and 5-5, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so they are proposed to be carved up into 4 lots, all of which would utilize one access on the Darby Paoli Road.
Correct.
Did you do a site distance study of that road?
Yes. We looked at all the driveways on Darby Paoli Road also.
Okay. Well, what did you determine? Because it's not in the report. So I guess my question is are the existing conditions, do they show safe stopping distance?
On Darby Paoli Road, for the 4 driveways that are the four southernmost driveways, we found that the site distance was and does comply with PennDOT's minimum standards. The driveway that would serve 5-1, we believe is debatable whether it meets it in both directions. Therefore, we have noted that, have been looking at that internally with our team. And it's my understanding that if it's deemed that that driveway has inadequate site distance, there is other options for that property to come out onto the cul-de-sac, the new cul-de-sac.
Okay. Well, the plans do show a potential connection onto that cul-de-sac, correct?
It does, yes.
Okay. Okay, going south, I have Lot 4-9 also taking access onto Darby Paoli Road,
Yes,
correct?
correct.
And do you know what's on that lot? Is that an existing residential structure?
Yes.
And here's where I'm going to have some difficulty. Looks like 4-10, which is all the way at the bottom of the property. It looks like there's two accesses that come out off of 4-10.
Yes, there's two driveways that we would call like a couplet. It's almost a ring road type design.
What is it that you called it?
A couplet,
Is that like a U-shaped road?
yes.
Okay. So it's, and how far are the two legs of the U apart? Did you measure that?
Based on this plan, it's approximately, I'd say between 250 to 300 feet.
And did you examine the site distance for both of those legs of the U?
Yes. And we found them to be acceptable.
Okay. You haven't generated any report or anything to that effect, is that right?
We have not.
Is that something you would do during the land development phase? You could verify that?
We could, yes, if requested.
Okay, so that's the 5, is that right?
Correct.
There's 2 on 410, there's 1 on 49, there's 1 that will access 5-2 through 5-5, and there's 1 at 5-1, with a possibility that that driveway, would that be terminated if access was put through to the cul-de-sac? That driveway, do you know?
That could be the situation. You could potentially leave it open as a entrance-only driveway, or you could potentially leave it open as an emergency access to the cul-de-sac.
Okay. For everyone else to possibly use coming out of the cul-de-sac?
Emergency access if, I'm sure the township has its requirements for, maintaining emergency access in the form of chains or bollards or whatever traffic control. You wouldn't, if it was deemed to be unacceptable altogether, then our recommendation would be, if I was reviewing this, would be to keep it as at least an emergency access.
Okay. Mr. Richardson, on T1, the Gilmore review letter, got a couple of questions about some of Ms. Kaminsky's comments there. Paragraph 10, there's a discussion about Conestoga Road and Radnor Chester Road during the PM peak hour. And the comment that she makes is that the TIS analysis, your study, indicates an acceptable level of service C for this approach, which suggests that maybe the counts were based upon the number of vehicles served as opposed to vehicular demand. Can you explain your understanding of what her comment is there?
Yes, essentially, when we complete traffic counts, we man the intersection. We place a technician at the intersection during the time period that has been chosen. In this case, 7 to 9 in the morning, 4 and 6 in the evening, 4 and 6 p.m. When you're looking at an intersection, we're counting the vehicles that are actually making the turning movements. And when you run into certain intersections that may have some congestion or backups due to the traffic control, there is a queuing that or stacking of vehicles that occurs. And sometimes, and I'm not saying it's true for this intersection, but sometimes there are reasons that you want to make sure that during that time period that you not only counted the vehicles that are making turning movements, but how many vehicles were starting to stack on the approaches.
That's the vehicle demand.
That's
right?
the vehicle demand, right?
Okay.
So our interpretation of this is that Ms. Kaminsky wants to perform a field view of the intersection and adjust our analyses accordingly. And there are methods to adjust your analyses. We're willing to do that. However, much like the previous testimony and some of your questions, Mr. Rice, is that we cannot do that until the bridge is back in place, because therefore we wouldn't be representative of true conditions out in the field.
Okay, but that particular intersection, the queuing she's referring to is coming from Lancaster Avenue on Radnor Chester towards Newtown. Is that right?
Well, it's a combination. Well, the Conestoga Road, yeah, we're looking at Conestoga Road.
Right.
And Radnor Chester, right.
Right,
yeah.
to Conestoga and
Yeah.
then through there to Newtown. But it's that intersection which is relatively tight. That's where the queuing occurs currently. Is that right?
It's mainly, yes, and it could be any of the approaches, but mainly Conestoga Road.
She made a comment Ms. Kaminsky made a comment in her report about crash data investigation. And I guess the issue there is your analysis has excluded non-reportable crashes, and you've quantified the number of crashes by month as opposed to a 12-month period. What's the difference between a non-reportable crash and a reportable crash?
A non-reportable crash is a crash that has been, that involves a vehicle or more than one vehicle or single vehicle that resulted in an injury or the vehicle itself having to be towed from the scene.
That's a reportable crash.
That's a reportable crash. A non-reportable crash would be just the opposite, or a minor fender bender, possibly two cars stacked at a traffic signal and one would be bumped by the other and not paying attention. But,
Right. So if I hit a mailbox going down Radnor Chester Road and the mailbox didn't survive, but I could continue to drive along, that would be a non-reportable accident. Right?
It could be a hit and run, depending on the situation, but if you were to report it to your insurance company or report it to the local authorities, that would be...
Well, I would immediately
yeah,
drive to
yeah.
the Radnor PD and report what I did. But that would still be classified as a non-reportable because I could drive away and nobody was injured. Right?
Correct. It could be, yes.
Now, it's still getting reported to the Radnor PD, but it's still called a non-reportable accident according to PennDOT, right?
Correct.
Okay. So that's my question. Did you look at what's on file in this building with the Radnor Township Police Department regarding non-reportable crashes? Because they do keep track of that, don't they?
They do, and we did obtain information from the police.
Okay. Since you did your study?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But that hasn't been cranked into the study at this point?
It has not. Reason why we obtained the information was based on Ms. Kaminsky's comment, and we, like I said, are able to comply with all of the comments in the letter itself.
Now, she made a few other comments which seem to be requests for more information, such as number 13 in her letter on page 5. I'm not going to ask you what synchro and sim traffic reports are, because I think I would probably get a headache, but that's information that you can provide to her, is that right?
We certainly can. Is our opinion that we did provide that in the study. It's just a matter of we need to direct Ms. Kaminsky where that information is.
But it's not in this report, I think was her.
It is in the report. It's in the what the sim traffic and the synchro are the analyses that are produced by when we analyze the intersections. When I referred to the levels of service at the intersections, there's printouts, the results of the analyses, and that is provided in the appendices of the report.
Okay.
It's just a matter of explaining to Ms. Kaminsky or finding out what exactly she's looking for, so we're on the same page. Again, I believe we can comply with this and show her that the information is there to her satisfaction.
Okay, so on that point, and then there's a comment about trip distribution discrepancies, which also looks like she's requesting additional information. Is that something else that you can provide?
We can, yes.
Okay. There's a comment on page 5 under the conditional use plan set. Phase 4, parcel 411 does not appear to have any driveway access. Can you identify where parcel 411 is on the plan?
.411 is located in the southwestern portion of the development.
Okay, that's a parcel that is, it looks like it's about 4 acres, and it's behind the U driveway, but it looks like it has a pole that goes out to, like a flagpole, that goes out to Darby Paoli Road, correct?
Yes, that would be, I guess, in classification as a flag lot.
Okay. Do you know whether that's proposed to be a building lot?
It does not show up as a house being placed on
Okay.
on that lot at this time.
Okay,
So
so this,
therefore, I would say no, it does not anticipate the construction of a home.
so that looks like it may be one of the investment lots?
I'm not fully versed on the definition of the investment lots and as it pertains. My study was for the houses that
Okay.
are proposed on the plan.
And your study was based on 87 houses, is that right?
Correct.
I think you say that. If there was any more houses than 87, then I assume you could probably modify your study, but you would need to do a new study, is that right?
Well, I believe we could add at least an additional 11 houses to the study, because there are at least 11 houses on the site that are occupied, that are generating traffic today, that we did not subtract out of the traffic volumes that are on Newtown Road and Darby Paoli Road. So therefore, our study has, if you want to say, for lack of better terms, it has a buffer and a safety factor of 11 homes.
Okay. But your executive summary talks about 87, and then you summarize the development, you list the 5 phases, the number of homes, either new or existing, that are in each phase, right?
Correct, but there's also a statement in the report that states that there is 11 homes on the property that are currently occupied, and that we did not take any credit for those homes.
When you say you didn't take any credit for them, what do you mean?
We didn't subtract out the traffic volumes for those 11 homes. Typically, let's say, I'll give you an example of let's say you had a commercial development.
Okay.
And you may have had, like, let's say, a dry cleaner on that development. It's generating traffic today. The lease is up on that property, and you put in more intensive use. Let's say you put in a Wawa. In most terms, you would in most instances, you would take credit for the volume that was already on that driveway, and therefore the net increase or the delta would be, X. We did
Smaller.
not get rid of the delta. We didn't account for that delta in this study. We assumed that 87 brand-new homes would be constructed, even though there are 11 already on there.
Do you know whether all 11 are occupied?
My understanding that there's at least 13 to 14 families actually living on the property. But again, we're only assuming 11.
Okay, but you included all that in your study?
Yes.
That's the point. Okay. You testified last hearing that the level of service as a result of what you study goes down at 2 intersections. Could you identify which intersections?
Yes. The intersection of Newtown Road and Radnor Chester Road during the morning peak hour degraded from a level of service A to a B. And the second instance was Darby Paoli Road and Brook Road, which again dropped from or degraded from a level of service A to a level of service B.
Now, I guess I should ask you to describe what a level of service is and what's the difference between an A and a B?
The level of services that we use is just the criteria, the grading criteria that we as traffic planners utilize to determine how effective an intersection operates. And we also use it as a tool of comparison of with construction and without construction, pre versus post construction. The levels of service range from a level service A being the most desirable, and level service F, least desirable, failing to conditions, poor conditions, much like you're graded in school. There's a level service E. We're not graded with a level service E in school, but level service A in this instance is anything less than 10 seconds in delay at an intersection for an unsignalized intersection.
So if I come to an intersection and I'm stopping, there's a stop sign, it's going to take me 10 seconds or less to get through that intersection.
Correct.
Okay, that's a level of service A.
Yes.
No signal, stop sign, okay.
Right.
Now, what's the B level of service? What's the
B
time?
is 10 to, I believe it's 25. I'll get the exact number. Unsignalized is 10 to 15, I'm sorry. 10 to 15 seconds.
Okay, and how about a C?
C is 15 to 25. And these levels of service the delays are presented in the study in a table 11. So you can reference the,
And you do these at the peak hour? Okay.
during the peak hour, the
AM.
highest traffic volume hours,
Okay, what is the AM peak hour for this area?
8 o'clock to 9 o'clock a.m.
And how about the how about the PM peak hour? What,
The PM peak hour, we found it varies between 4:45 to 5:45 or 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m., depending on the intersection.
so if I jump to an F intersection, how long am I waiting at the stop sign to get through the intersection? What's the time on that?
For an unsignalized intersection, it is, I believe it's 60 seconds. Let me just confirm that. They've changed these tables recently, so I want to make sure. Page 10. Yeah, I lost my page. 50 seconds.
Okay, so
Anything
that's-
greater than 50. It used to be 60, that's why I
and
quoted 60.
there's nothing lower than an F intersection, correct?
There is not.
Even though there are intersections in the state that you can sit for longer than 50 seconds.
Yes.
So how do you, in order to improve, if I have an F intersection or a D, and I want to improve it to a C or a B or an A, what typically has to happen at that intersection?
It will depend on the type of intersection. If it's a signalized intersection, the quickest way to improve levels of services, and it's cheapest, is to tweak the timings of the signal, give more time to the approaches that need it based on the demand. If timing does not work, then capacity improvements such as turning lanes would need to be, that would be the next step that you would take a look at. For unsignalized intersections, the simple solution is to improve a level service. Again, you typically wouldn't improve an intersection, unsignalized intersection, unless it's failing. The first step would be to look at if the intersection could be reconfigured to make it a multi-way stop. And therefore, basically all vehicles stop, and then they're granted the right of way depending on when they arrived at the intersection. The next step would be any particular turning movements that are failing that causes the whole intersection to fail. You would possibly look at putting in separate lanes, channelization, those kind of things. The final improvement would be signalization, and that's typically the hardest criteria to meet because you can't put traffic signals at every intersection. You have to meet certain warrants. PennDOT has criteria that you must, a minimum criteria that you must satisfy before they will allow you to install a traffic control device such as a signal.
And these are the two roads are PennDOT roads. Have you had any discussions with PennDOT regarding any improvements out there as a result of the proposed development?
We have not at this point.
So you said unless the intersection's failing, so it has to be at an F before those type of improvements would be warranted by PennDOT, is that correct?
Not necessarily. What PennDOT is, and what we're trying to achieve in this traffic study on the township level is to show that if a level of service degrades to a point that it causes unsafe conditions or unsafe congestion, undue congestion, that certain levels of service should be mitigated and brought back to pre-construction levels of service. Based on our analyses, we show the level of service A drops to a B, but in both of those instances, the increase in delay was 3 seconds or less, and it just happened to be that those level of service A's were on the cusp of a B already, and it wasn't a significant increase in delay in my viewpoint.
Okay, Mr. Richardson, one other issue, and this, again, is from the Exhibit T1, the Gilmore letter. Paragraph 12 identifies two intersections, Darby-Paoli and Newtown Road, and then Darby-Paoli and Brook Road. Both of these, as I understand the issue that's raised here, involve T intersections where there are stop signs in one direction, but the driver has the option to make a right without stopping. I mean, it's a stop sign, but if I want to make a right, I don't have to stop.
Yes, on certain approaches, there is a free flow for the right turning movement, but
So if I'm at a stop sign, if I want to go straight, I'm stopping. If I want to make a right, I don't have to stop.
correct.
The opposing traffic, though, I think the issue that's raised here is that that's a confusing situation for the traffic coming in the other direction. Do you agree with that?
I don't know if it's necessarily confusing. The design of those intersections, or any intersection that has that, there are signs on the approaches that do not have free flow, that the opposite or opposing traffic does not stop. That's the typical way that is handled. You'll have a stop sign, either it says all traffic must stop except right turns, and approaches that where you don't have that particular movement, it would most likely have a sign that says opposing traffic does not stop.
But does that have that out at these two
Yes,
intersections?
there are those instances. So I don't see.
So the opposing traffic is warned that the other people at the other stop sign aren't going to stop.
Correct.
And that's signed that way currently.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
The recommendation that is in here is that there may be a benefit out there to an all-way stop control at the two intersections. Do you agree with that?
We have, again, we've had the opportunity to look at some of Ms. Kaminsky's comments and try to address them because we knew they would come up in these hearings. We did take a look at those two particular intersections and did analyze it in that fashion, meaning all approaches stop, is what we would term a multi-way stop intersection. The results of that analysis exhibited failing conditions on some of the approaches where those approaches, and as it turned out, those approaches were the free flow movements today. So therefore, our opinion is that by going with a multi-way stop, you're stopping certain turning movements unnecessarily, and you're degrading the levels of service to a failing condition where that doesn't exist today, in our opinion.
So if that information is presented to PennDOT, I'm assuming it's unlikely PennDOT, because PennDOT would have to approve this change, correct?
Yes, the typical procedure is the township would make application to PennDOT for that change. And then PennDOT would review it. They would review traffic studies. They would do their own traffic studies, collect their own data, and then make a determination if the improvement should be implemented or not.
I don't have any other questions for Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mr. Edelson, any questions?
Yes, Mr. Bola. Mr. Richardson, I just have a couple of questions. I'm sorry.
Just hit this.
I'm sorry. I just have a couple of questions. Before I begin, though, I wanted to ask you, do peak hours, in your experience, differ with geographic areas? In other words, are some peak hour traffic times different in some areas as opposed to others?
They can be, yes.
And is there anything unique about the peak, in your opinion, is there anything unique about this geographic area with regard to the peak hours?
No, where we have found the hours to be, I mean, typically you would look for the commuter peak hours for a residential development. The peak hours for a residential development coincide with the commuter peak. It's self-evident that majority of the traffic are leaving a development to go to work in the morning and come home in the evening. That's why we look at those two time periods. The time periods that we look at, again, 7 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 are the common time periods. It's 2-hour periods in each instance that we look at. Are there, where I have found is like in areas of Chester County where vehicles have to travel much further to their destinations and their employment centers, we have typically had to review traffic counts that begin at 6 o'clock in the morning to make sure we captured the peak hour. Right. But for this particular area, Radnor, and along the main line, nothing that I would suspect would change my mind that this is not the appropriate time periods to look at. 7 to 9 and 4 to 6 in the evening are the highest traffic volumes.
I now would like to call your attention to your study, Exhibit MT19, and just have some questions regarding the study itself. I'd call your attention to the executive summary, little I, the first page of the executive summary. If you look about the first comment, dotted comment, the project scope and extent of the study area were confirmed with representatives of the township staff. What did the township staff really confirm as it relates to the scope and extent of this particular study area, just generally?
The intersections that we would analyze and the time periods that we would obtain information.
And did they discuss any other details with regard to this at all?
Specifically, no.
And now to, let's see, to the bottom where it says 5 driveways to Newtown Road. The report, your report in the executive summary refers to driveways. I'm assuming you were present last week when Mr. Fiorello testified with regard to the fact that many of these so-called driveways will be dedicated as public roads?
Yes, I heard that testimony, yes.
Okay. Shouldn't the traffic study be revised to indicate the driveways that are actually public roads, or will be, as far as impact?
I don't believe so. And when I have to explain that when I refer to a driveway, you can even call it an access. The township has its own definition of roadways, streets. In my jargon as a traffic engineer and have to deal with PennDOT, each access point out onto their roadways is considered a driveway. It's 4 classifications: a minimum use driveway, a low volume driveway, medium volume, and a high volume. When I refer to a driveway, it could refer to a roadway that will be dedicated and could serve over 20 homes. I could also refer to a driveway that serves 1 home. But in my definition of a driveway is typically does not, always agree with the municipal definition. So therefore, I'm referring to any access point, vehicular access
So
point.
almost any curb cut that has an access?
Correct.
Okay. Call your attention, I think, to page II. The first major bullet point says the measured site refers to the measured site distances, and it says with appropriate removal of on-site definite vegetation and wall. You said the measured site distances exceed PennDOT site distance requirements. But the wall and the removal of vegetation is sort of a contingent factor here, so it's not existing conditions, right? It's those that could exist?
And I'll try to answer the statement best I can.
I know I convoluted it. So
That's okay. No, when we say with appropriate removal of on-site vegetation and wall, when we do our analyses, we go out to the site. We measure 10 feet back from the roadway surface, because that is the distance that a driver is assumed to be from the roadway surface. We crouch down, we literally crouch down to 3.5 feet height, which is the required height per PennDOT standards, and we look in both directions for a vehicle exiting out of a driveway. We do the same thing for vehicles entering a driveway, for lefts approaching the vehicle from the rear and the driver looking forward. When we find that there is an obstruction, what we typically do is move up a few feet to where we can see to a certain distance, and then we make a determination what is the obstruction and what needs to be removed. When PennDOT reviews this, they will do the same analysis. They will go out to the site, measure it, and they will not permit a driveway that doesn't have the adequate site distance. They will tell us how much of that wall needs to be removed if we want a permit. So we are at their mercy at that point.
So it's fair to say that then what you're talking about is something that doesn't exist as of right now?
As of right now, no, but it could exist.
Could exist.
It could exist, yes.
With regard to, I'm sure, I know you've referred to them, I'm still on II. You talk about in the 3rd bullet point down, we're talking about PennDOT's TIS guidelines or traffic impact guidelines. How do they differ from Radnor's traffic impact ordinance?
Well, Radnor doesn't really have a traffic impact study requirements,
It doesn't have a traffic impact ordinance?
not to the best of my knowledge.
And then, I guess 3 bullet points up from the bottom on the same page, we're talking about mutually agreed upon potential safety enhancement improvements. What are mutually agreed upon potential safety? Could you elaborate on that? What would you expect to find?
Well, those could be, the purpose of this statement, again, is to, because at this stage of the process, because we're not in land development, we don't know what the township is going to be looking for in terms of what improvements that the township would like to see at these intersections that we analyzed. The typical process is we do our traffic study, the township traffic consultant will review it and make comments, and we will address those. I imagine somewhere down the line when we get into land development, if we get to that point, is that we would work with the township to come to some agreement if there are certain enhancements such as increased signing, improvements of pedestrian facilities at certain intersections. Basically, the comment is to express that we are willing to work with the township to make sure that we maintain and provide a safe and efficient vehicular access to the roadway, and also not to endanger the motoring public that passes by the site every day.
So it's, at this point, nothing specific, just that it's in the spirit of cooperation, something that you will coordinate, or assuming you would coordinate going forward.
Yes, I think you put it perfectly.
Just above it, I know we've had a couple of questions regarding these spot check counts. I know you testified, and there's been testimony to the effect that of the bridge being out. When, or if at all, when, do you have any idea when you could expect that bridge to be? Have you researched when the township expects to have it, or when it's expected to be up and running?
Based on discussions we've had with staff, township staff, it has been determined that that bridge is a historical arch bridge, which is going to take longer than most bridges because you have to go through the red tape. If it was not a stone bridge, I would say, you could, if funds were available, that bridge could be replaced immediately, if funds were available. The process is probably going to take a little bit longer. I would expect somewhere between a year and 2 years, and based on some of the discussions that we've had with the township.
Okay, I'll call your attention to page 4 of Exhibit MT-19. Down to the section titled Automatic Traffic Recorder Counts. And would ask you, in your experience, is it typical for a development of 300 acres on 2 state roads to only have a traffic count done in only one location on each road? Is that typical to only have one traffic counter on each road?
That's been our experience, yes.
Okay. Bear with me one sec.
Take your time.
On page 5, same exhibit, there's a section titled at the top, Annual Background Growth. And what are PennDOT's Bureau of Planning and Research growth factors for Chester County and Montgomery County? Do you know?
Montgomery County is 0.73.
Right.
Chester County is, and I just looked at this yesterday, is over 1%. It's 1.9%, I believe. I do not know what Bucks County's is.
Well, I was really thinking more in terms of adjacent counties to here.
Right.
Whether it might not be more appropriate.
I'll say Philadelphia would be, it's actually a negative %.
Just below it, nearby proposed developments is the subsection. The Wheeler Track is the only other project in the area that's been considered to have a potential impact on this development with regard to this report that I could find. Are you familiar with Toll Brothers development in Newtown?
We have consulted with, I am familiar with it. I will say that we consulted with the traffic consultant, and we did discuss that particular development, and it was decided that that would not be included in our study.
So it's your testimony that, at least for the purposes of your study, it doesn't have an impact, or just that you didn't consider it?
It does not have an impact that would cause any change in the volumes that we, significant changes in the volumes that we collected.
Okay. And then one other potential, at least in a neophyte's opinion of an impact, is the Radnor ordinance change to its commercial zoning district, the Biomed property. Do you think that might have an impact, or is that something that maybe should have been considered?
I'm currently involved with a neighboring property who is,
That's why I asked.
it depends on what plan that they have approved. My client would like to see a traffic neutral plan, which doesn't increase volumes. But there will, if depending on the size of the development, could be an increase in traffic. However, it will be more in the immediate area of the Route 30, Radnor, Chester, and King of Prussia road corridors, and Matson Ford Road also.
So we can assume that, at least knowing of it, you wouldn't think that it would have an impact here, you probably would have included it.
I do not believe that it will have a significant enough impact that it would, that it should have been studied, or should have been considered.
Page 9. Your table on trip distribution percentages. How are trip distribution percentages calculated? Those, the last column, how are they calculated?
Well, it depends on the type of development.
Right.
What we have is a residential development being placed in a residential area. We, as traffic consultants, look at a number of factors. One of the major factors that you look at is the area that, and traffic patterns that travel the roads that you analyzed. And one of the things you would particularly look at is the roadway network itself and where the volume is coming from and going to today. Based on that, at the location of the driveways themselves will determine where we project volumes and what roadways to use. What I would say in this particular study is we have distributed the volumes to a number of roadways, and probably more roadways than we would in other areas, because of the nature of the roadway network itself and where people are traveling to and what roads they use. For instance, Godfrey Road and Abrams, on face value, you might not think people would use those roads, but those are local roads that people do cut through, and we wanted to make sure we placed traffic volumes on those key roadways and didn't ignore them. So that's why we distributed a certain percentage to those roadways.
Page 10, the capacity analysis methodology. The second sentence, it reads, the majority of the study area intersections were analyzed according to methodologies, goes on to talk about what they were. Can you tell us why the majority of the intersections in this study, what that constitutes, and why weren't all the intersections studied, considering a lot of them may be cut through?
Well, the reason why, all the intersections were analyzed, and they were all analyzed using the software. What this statement is trying to impart is that there are 3 intersections. While Ms. Kaminsky's letter said there were 2, there's actually 3 non-traditional intersections that we cannot analyze in your traditional way using this model. So therefore, we have to adjust the model, and meaning we have approaches. If you had a multi-way stop intersection, you could analyze it using the model properly. What we would look at with these non-traditional intersections, we have to look at it differently. We have to look at the particular approaches, what opposing volumes are present, and we have to look at it a little bit different than we have. The methodology that we have utilized is common, that we use this methodology to look at these non-traditional intersections, ones where you might have a free flow on a different leg than you on a traditional T intersections, for instance. So therefore, that's what the statement means.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's, okay. And then,
It wasn't that we didn't look at the intersections. We did look at and analyze them.
Okay.
Right.
You understand my question was because of the way it was worded, I guess.
I understand.
A little further down in the paragraph, I'm looking at the sentence that has the sim traffic analysis and appears consistent with field observations. If the field observations were consistent, why did you use sim traffic analysis?
Well, Synchro is the model. It's basically an interface to the highway capacity manual. Sim traffic is a model that we use that we compare the results of the synchro, and it's actually a graphic model that actually shows the vehicles moving on the roadway network. And one of the tools that we use it for is to observe queuing on certain approaches. What we do is we typically would compare the results of the study and make sure that those conditions are happening in the field and vice versa. So that's why we would use sim traffic. And that's another tool that we had to use for this analysis because of the non-traditional design of these intersections.
Okay. And I'll call your attention, I think, to page 13. Page 13 talks about the LOS levels of service, and can you confirm, my understanding is DVRPC has a study that has planned and traffic will increase about 0.51% a year. Are you familiar with their study that talks about the increase in this area?
Not specifically, no.
Okay, then I won't ask you.
But I will say that they consider population as a major factor of either growth or decrease as a major factor in their projections. We use PennDOT's numbers, and that's the BPR number that was referenced earlier. We use those numbers because it's a combination of not only the population increases or decreases, but also actual traffic counts that are conducted. So therefore, I'm not belittling the DVRPC. It has its own value, but in terms of traffic, I would not use that number because that's more, PennDOT's number is more for the particular county and the particular roadway that you're analyzing, while DVRPC's number is more in general for the whole region and isn't very specific.
Well, I asked the question only because you have some of these intersections as actually improving in 2020 after the build-out, and I was that's what led me to start to look around at it. So you have, for instance, Darby-Paoli Road, the first one, with a build-out year projected at B, and then the peak hour at A, and I was concerned about, it looked to me like they were improving, and I didn't understand that.
Are you referring to table 12
Yeah.
on 13?
Yeah.
Maybe you're not understanding the way I would have this table is, the B is for the westbound approach during
Right.
the morning period.
Left, right.
The A is during the PM peak hour. So therefore, it's not getting better.
It's not getting, okay.
It's two different peak hours.
Okay, then I'll withdraw that. Okay. I have no further questions this time.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Edelson. The Radnor Conservancy is next. Ms. Kreitler indicated she would not be here this evening. Is there a sub for her?
There is a substitute.
Very good. Sir, would you identify yourself, please?
I will. My name is David Toomey, Toomey. I live at 332 Walnut Avenue. I'm an officer and director of the Radnor Conservancy.
And you are here to serve in the stead of Ms. Kreitler as she was unavailable this evening.
She is
sir.
unavailable, and so I'm a poor substitute, I fear, but I'm here.
Very good, Mr. Toomey. You'll be entitled to ask questions of this
Thank you.
witness.
From our standpoint, the starting point of any analysis of this application is the recognition that the applicant, as a matter of right, could build over 160 houses on this property.
Mr. Chairman, I think that Mr. Toomey,
May not be aware of the rules, yeah.
Yeah.
This is
This
not an opportunity to testify, sir.
Oh,
This is only an opportunity to ask questions of Mr. Richardson, the traffic engineer, based upon his direct examination at the last hearing.
I stand corrected.
No question?
I will wait till it's time for us to give.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Morgan?
Hello.
Good evening.
Hello. Leslie Morgan, 12 Farm Road. I don't know much about traffic, but I've had to do a few traffic studies myself. I recently finished a phasing one, and there was 3 buildings on the property, and this was in a different state, but, you know, they're all called Maryland Dot or Del Dot or Penn Dot. They made me do my study on full capacity. And so I was going to ask you, how many phasing projects have you done in Delaware County residentially? This is a phased project. There's 5 phases. How many traffic studies have you done on multiple phases?
I can't think of any off the top of my head,
So-
because I look at the final phase and the full build-out.
Okay, and what is the full build-out, to your knowledge, of this particular site, Main Tract Ardrossan, 311?
Based on the plan that was included in our traffic study, was for 87 single-family residential homes.
Would it surprise you to find out that we are told that it's 154 to 167, depending on the bonuses?
87.
Yeah, I think you may have misunderstood. The plan is for 87.
This application is.
Right.
But in the framework, Lawyer Bola, we have numbers that say, 154.
Thank you, Citizen Morgan.
Guys, gotcha.
There was testimony as to the maximum yield under various scenarios.
Yes.
That's
And-
what the question would be. What?
Okay. Both the attorney for the applicant and the engineer has testified that on this site, by the Radnor zoning codes and maybe Pennsylvania municipal codes, the maximum yield on the site can be as much as 167. Have you done a traffic study for 167 on this site?
No, I have not.
Could you perform that kind of study? Would you be able to with your background?
If I had a plan that showed 167 homes on it, and I was asked to do that by my client, I would do it.
When you interface with PennDOT and you're dealing with multi-phase residential developments, does PennDOT require you to do your analysis on the max density of the site if the phases are shown?
The max development of this site, as if it was presented to PennDOT today, would be 87 homes, not anything more. If we submitted an application that was, we were planning 87 homes and we built 167, then we'd be in violation of our permits, and therefore PennDOT would have the right to revoke it or ask us to do a new study.
Okay, let me ask a question a little way, and I may stumble. I'm calling this Grandmaster Phase 1, and there's 5 subphases. If potentially there is a modification to the application, and there is a Grandmaster Phase 2 with maybe 5 other phases, and that second application, you would be hired and you would do a second application traffic study, potentially, correct? You would, if there was another application after this one, which included more houses, you would have to do a secondary traffic study for PennDOT, correct?
Not necessarily. It would have to be a significant increase in the number of homes, and that application would most likely have to stand on its own.
What is considered a significant increase?
Anything that would generate a significant number of vehicles.
Could
Adding
you-
5 homes to 87 homes, in my viewpoint, is not a significant number. It's only 1 new car per home during the peak hour, so that's not a significant number.
Is 10?
Is 10?
10 new homes on 87.
No.
Is 20?
It depends on how that affects these intersections. That is the major, that's how you determine the impact of a site, is if the number of homes that you're building, if you're increasing them at increments, then that will tell you that it's going to have an impact. Therefore, we did it based on levels of service. If I add 10 homes and the level service dropped to a level service F, then that shows that there's a significant impact and that the developer would have to mitigate those impacts.
Okay, so there might be a tipping point, you're saying?
There could be a tipping point, yes.
Okay. I have just a few more questions. Since this was brought up already, this is a picture of the Toll Brothers development called Lissitor. And this is for 449. The density is much higher. So where here it is, you need 1 unit per 2 acres underlined. This was 1.17 units per 1 acre. They did this in phases as well, okay? They did this in,
On the tape.
oh. They did this in phases as well, but PennDOT required them to do all traffic mitigation up front. And that's why they're not building some of these units right away. They're doing this in phases. So my question is, what's the difference in this one versus this one in traffic mitigation on the whole tract for the road systems?
My understanding is the 87 homes is the ultimate build-out of the development. Regardless if its first phase is 10, next phase is 15. I agree with you that PennDOT would ask you to look at all the phases, and they will work with you depending on the economy and when they could build houses, how fast they're selling them.
Timing,
But
tipping
you,
points.
exactly. So you look at the ultimate build-out of the site. This site is ultimately, in my viewpoint, and the way it has been presented to me on the plan, is that 87 homes would be the number of homes that would be built. If I go to PennDOT, I show them this plan, they would say, fine, you have 87 homes. And then I could say, well, I only want to build 10 of them. What do I need to do at this point?
Right.
They would say, well, you may not need to do any widening or signal timing changes, but you're going to need to do it further down the road. And they're going to want to know when you do that. But
Okay.
they are looking at the ultimate build-out, the ultimate impact of the 87, and not the first 10 or 15.
So if the application were changed in the next year or two to 154, you would have to change this study, correct? That is a different, between 87 and 154 is a large enough differential that PennDOT might require a new study, and maybe Radnor Township as well?
You have to also consider that I'm not quite sure which driveway the additional units that you're referring to are going to come off of. So therefore, certain driveways would not need to be reanalyzed. If they're already their ultimate build-out of part of the 87.
Right, self-contained.
Then you wouldn't have to do a new study of that.
Okay.
And then PennDOT would look at each individual application. If there's 20, let's say there's 20 new homes added, and you go to PennDOT and if the township requires the applicant to go back to PennDOT because of those 20 homes, PennDOT will make a determination whether they need to amend their permit and make any additional improvements based on that impact from those 20. It's because the applicant has changed his original application.
Right.
So therefore, they may or may not require a new study.
2 quick questions, one on this and then something else. This is proposed to be one-way. It's sort of a lopsided U, okay? It's a one-way. If the applicant then builds out this investment lot and it has to switch to two-way, does that create a significant change in your opinion?
I don't believe it necessarily would be defined as significant. What it would be required is that if a permit is granted from PennDOT for a one-way driveway at the westernmost driveway, and a permit is permitted for an exit-only driveway at the eastern part of the U loop, and the applicant wishes to change that configuration, the applicant will be required to go to PennDOT to request that.
And the other thing is, you said that you studied the complexion of who drives the roads. Who's coming on to Darby Paoli and going to and from work, or cutting through from Newtown Township or Easttown Township? Do you have any hard data on, like, we were sort of told that on, so this is Newtown and Darby Paoli, especially this road. People come from other townships, and they sort of pass through here and then go up here and go out to 476. Do you have any data within your traffic study that you could point me to on how many are coming from other townships to burden this particular road system and this particular road system? Do you have that kind of sophistication? I asked our traffic study person, and she said there is that kind of information, but she didn't use it.
Do I have the information available? No. Are there ways to find out? Yeah.
Could you explain that technology?
Yeah, it's called a polling system. You would have to stand out at the intersection and ask the township, each individual driver where they're
Thought you meant a
from.
poll. Okay,
Polling, P-O-L-L.
thank you very much.
Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. Ms. Price? Ms. Price, do you have a number of questions? Is it a good time for a break, or should we get you and your husband in?
I don't think I have a lot. I'm
Okay,
only
great.
talking about one corner.
Okay.
I just wanted to talk to you about the traffic study you did on Radnor, Chester Road, and Conestoga Road.
Yes, ma'am.
The traffic study you did that in July.
Yes.
Would you expect traffic to increase if you did that in September?
As I stated earlier, we believe our numbers are, even though they were done in July, they are indicative of the traffic volumes at that time, and the patterns before the bridge went out were appropriate.
Well, the bridge you're talking about is not an access route to Radnor, Chester Road, and Conestoga. You're talking about the bridge on Darby-Paoli Road?
Yes, but that bridge has significantly impacted all the intersections in the area for vehicles that were traveling on Darby-Paoli Road. So therefore, volumes that are on Radnor, Chester have been affected considerably also.
Well, when you did your study, Radnor High School wasn't open in July.
Correct,
Radnor Elementary School wasn't open in July.
correct.
So if you did this study now in September, you would expect to have more travel routes for parents dropping kids off, or kids coming back for sporting events, people going to events, that type of thing. Isn't that correct?
That could happen, but as I stated earlier in my testimony, in my direct testimony, is that we took that into account. Even though we felt our numbers were legitimate and were accurate, we increased them by 5% to account for seasonal adjustments, meaning when schools are in session, and we found no appreciable difference in the levels of service or the impact that this site would have on these intersections.
So your testimony said there's only a 5% difference between what happens in July, which you would assume to be a vacation type time, and what happens in September.
Based on my 25 years of experience and looking at volumes in the summertime and non-summertime volumes, I feel comfortable with the 5%.
Okay. Also, when you're talking about the bridge being out, if you were coming from 76 or 476 or King of Prussia Road or Lancaster, you wouldn't come down Darby-Paoli Road to get to this property where the bridge is out. You'd come down Radnor-Chester Road, wouldn't you? More likely to come that way.
Yeah, Brook Road is probably, and Abrams Lane has probably seen the biggest increases of vehicles that are traveling south on Darby-Paoli. They have to find a new way to get around. So therefore, they have, cut through the neighborhoods. They would cut through go up Brook, go through Abrams, then come down to Darby and Newtown, where they were only a through vehicle going south, but they've changed their traffic patterns considerably. So traffic is like water. It finds the path of least resistance. So when you have a situation such as a bridge out, traffic patterns will change, and people will just find the easiest way that they can get where they're going. So therefore, I believe every one of these roads has been significantly impacted.
But I'm just trying to locate the people coming from 476. I don't know how, if you were living in this development, you would go down at all, how that bridge would impact you. I'm asking you, adding 87 houses now, and I'm coming off of 476 or 76 or King of Prussia Road. Every major route, you would come, make a left, and go down Radnor-Chester Road.
Not every vehicle does that.
Would you say the majority of vehicles do that?
I would say the majority of the vehicles, based on the houses that are proposed, majority of the houses are proposed on Newtown Road. So therefore, it's common sense to think that majority of the traffic is going to come out there. However, they don't all take a right out of the site and go to Radnor-Chester and go to Conestoga and are heading toward the Blue Route. Other people are heading south. They're heading in the other direction on Darby-Paoli. They would have been able to head north on Darby-Paoli and possibly, go to points in Newtown Township and all those other, in Easttown Township, where now that they would have to make a right out, make a quick left on the Abrams, and then go up to Brook Road and then make a right there. They wouldn't have to do that if the bridge was out. So that's why I'm saying that even though the site, the traffic is going to come out on the Newtown, it doesn't mean that it's all going to be heading in that one direction.
But wouldn't you say the majority of the traffic does head in that direction on Radnor-Chester Road from Newtown Road? these houses heading towards any one of those major routes?
Based on the traffic study, we have sent most of our traffic in that direction.
Okay.
But not all of it. If you look at the study itself, if you have an opportunity to look at the study, we distributed based on a certain percentage where the driveways are located and looked at where the volumes were going and coming to today. It's your neighbors, it's you that is, we analyzed and determined, I believe you live in Atterbury.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, one of the things we would look at is you're creating a right turn out of your driveway if you're heading toward the blue route. I'm not sure where you work, but if you're working in that direction, you're going to be turning out that direction. But if there's other people that live and work and want to drop their children off to schools or whatever facility, they might head out and take a left out of your development and proceed. But that doesn't mean everybody's going to take a right in and then a left in off of Newtown.
Okay. Well, did Ms. Comiskey put a notation? Did she indicate that she wanted you to repeat the traffic study at Radnor, Chester Road, and Conestoga? Was that one of her points?
No, she wanted us to look at field conditions to make sure that the traffic counts that we had were appropriate, much like she really wanted us to redo all the traffic counts or do spot counts to confirm that July was an appropriate time. And we've said all along, and I think I've stated it numerous times while I've been up here at least, that when the bridge is back in place, we would do the spot studies and determine if our findings were accurate. And if they aren't, then we would have to reassess, our impacts.
Okay, so it's your testimony that the bridge being out on Darby Paoli Road has a major impact on the traffic on Radnor Chester Road and Conestoga, such that until that bridge is out, you can't make any assessment.
I believe it has an impact on all the neighboring roadways in the area, not just Radnor, Chester, and Conestoga.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Price? Okay, very good. Any redirects, sir?
Yeah, very quickly. Mr. Richardson, you were asked about the barn lot and the site distance for that barn lot driveway.
Yes.
First of all, is that the only one on Darby Paoli Road that proposes
What's the
new
lot
units?
number? I don't know the barn lot.
Okay, you got, thank you.
5-2, Mr. Rice said.
5-2 through 5 through 5, 5-5.
Down here.
Right.
Yeah,
What's these four?
yeah. That's the one that has 2 new lots on it. 4 lots, two of them have existing buildings, 2 of them don't have buildings, correct?
Correct. The buildings that are shaded are the existing structures. There's 2 additional 5-4 and 5-5 that are
And that is,
proposed.
that is the one on Darby Paoli Road that would then require a permit?
Yes.
Okay. In your direct testimony, do you remember testifying about the site distance on that?
Yes, I
I would
do.
direct you to page 163, 164. Yeah.
Yes.
And do you remember Exhibit MT23 that I'm showing you?
Yes.
In fact, are those pictures of the site, the views both ways from that driveway as to what the site distances would have been
Yes.
or would be?
What they are, yes.
And did you testify that your conclusion was that there was safe stopping site distance in both directions?
I did, yes.
Secondly, with respect to the speed of traffic along the roadway, did I hear you testify that the DES, the desirable stopping site distance, doesn't change from, if it's 400 feet, it still stays 400 feet even if the speed of the traffic is higher than the posted speed limit?
No, if I confused you, the desirable site distance and the value that's in that table is based on 35 miles per hour. If the speed has been deemed to be greater than 35 miles per hour by 10 miles per hour, PennDOT requires you to use that higher speed. So if it was found to be at 47 miles per hour, even though it's posted at 35, they would require you to adjust that number up to 47 miles per hour.
Okay. Just to make sure that the hearing examiner understands your conclusions, are there any of these intersections that operate at less than a level B now?
None.
Are there any that will after our development?
None.
Are there any needed improvements to make these intersections safe as a result of the traffic that we're adding?
No improvements.
Thank you.
Recross, Mr. Rice, Mr. Edelson?
Just one question. Mr. Richardson,
Microphone.
I'll eventually learn. I'm going to call your attention to your table number 1 on little I in your study, intersection levels of service.
Okay.
If I were to tell you that the intersection of Conestoga and Radnor Chester backs up for almost a half a mile pretty much every evening, I'm trying to understand, and the reason I'm saying, I'm giving you a hypothetical. If I told you that if it backed up to close to a half a mile during the rush hour every evening, would it change your view of the 2 levels, Radnor Chester and Newtown Road, particularly the first 2, where you have 2013 existing as a level B and a level A respectively, and particularly with Newtown and Conestoga, a 2.9-second waiting time, which gave it the level A. The reason I'm asking is because reality just doesn't seem to jive with this, and I know you took your study in the summer, and I know that you adjusted it, but reality just doesn't. So if I told you that it backed up for about half a mile, almost every evening at that intersection, would it lead you to at least reassess that position if you accepted my premise?
If I observed it
Yep.
myself, I would possibly analyze it, and I believe the township's consultant has actually, that's what her concern was, and we intend to reanalyze it if and when we can. The problem is, the bridge is out, and so therefore, again, I'm not, and we've discussed this with the traffic consultant from the township, is they didn't even feel comfortable increasing the volume by a certain percentage because they felt that they just wanted to see the counts redone. They just didn't want to deal with an increase. So therefore, there are other problems on that. That it's an existing condition, it's an existing deficiency, and the volumes that we are adding, based on our analysis, is that regardless if it's a B or C, or a D or an E or an F, the increase in delay based on our development, and you look at the intersections in those, and if you're looking at table 1 for that intersection, the levels, the delay at those intersections only increased by 0.4 of a second. That's by just adding our volume. Okay?
Which I can accept as a condition and your burden under the conditional use. My problem is really, if it were an E or an F, it wouldn't make any difference how many seconds you added to it. So that's my concern is really what reality is right now, and that's why I asked the question. So again, if in fact it were proven, or if you accept my hypothetical, it would cause you to reassess that, though. That's my
Yes.
concern. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Very good. Any other questions from the private parties? No, from the parties to this matter? Okay, very good. All right, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll resume there.
8:30, right?
onset today, each day was taken in the morning, in the beginning today, or onset 2-3 weeks ago? In the first hearing. You know, what about if people cannot come every?
All right, very good. Let's resume the hearing. Mr. Schneider, next witness.
Thank you. My next witness is Eric Hetzel. Would you be sworn?
If you raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
And state your name for the record, please.
Eric Hetzel, E-R-I-K-H-E-T-Z-E-L.
And Mr. Hetzel, what's your profession?
I'm a principal at the land planning and landscape architecture firm of Glack and Thomas Panzak. I'm a certified planner at the American Institute of Certified Planners.
Educational experience?
I have a bachelor's degree from Westchester University in geography and planning, and a master's degree in urban planning, regional planning from the University of Pennsylvania.
And I've handed you something marked MT21. What is that?
That is my resume.
And in your performance of your duties as a land planner and regional planner, have you prepared economic and fiscal impact assessments for projects like this?
I have. I've prepared numerous impact reports, community impact statements, economic and fiscal impact statements, and ecological and community impact reports as well.
And have you presented those to various governmental bodies, municipalities, zoning hearing boards, et cetera?
I have.
Have you been in Radnor Township before?
I have not testified in Radnor before.
What, for example, local municipalities have you been in front of?
I've been East Whiteland, West Whiteland Townships in Chester County, Malvern Borough, Westchester Borough, Upper Marion in Montgomery County, Warrington Township in Bucks County.
That's an example. I would ask that Mr. Hetzel be admitted as or accepted as an expert in land planning, regional planning, community impact assessments.
That's a lot of fields.
Yep.
Mr. Rice, questions?
Just a couple. And, I mean, the planning expertise, I understand that. Community impact. The third thing was community impact assessments?
Assessments.
Okay. Mr. Hetzel, how many community impact assessments have you done? And define for me what your understanding of a community impact assessment is.
I would say I've probably done more than 20, and it varies by municipality. Usually it's laid out in the zoning ordinance. They ask that an applicant produce or prepare a report that demonstrates impacts from proposed development on numerous systems within a municipality, whether it be ecological impacts, environmental impacts, community, public service impacts, fiscal impacts. Usually they're laid out in the zoning ordinance. I will author sections of the report that I have direct expertise in and assemble pieces from other consultants as necessary and summarize their conclusions within the context of my report. For instance, I'm not a traffic impact expert, but I may include references to a traffic impact in a report if it's so required to be part of an impact assessment report.
Okay, so you're a planner, you're not a traffic engineer, you're not a civil engineer. You are not an economist, correct?
Correct.
So you're looking at a particular project, and I guess to some extent, we're controlled by what's required under the Radnor ordinance.
Correct.
Which would be, as part of the information to be submitted to the township, a statement which will show the ecological and economic impact of the development on the township and the surrounding, and especially as to the surrounding area. So, you don't consider yourself a ecologist, if that's even or an environmentalist, do you?
No, but I've had coursework in fields of ecology, economics, law, and design in my undergraduate and graduate studies. I've had professional experience prior to my employment. My current employment, I worked for an environmental engineering firm as a GIS analyst, supporting ecological impact assessments from a mapping and analysis standpoint. So I have significant professional experience, I think, supporting these kinds of studies. I understand many of the issues as they pertain to planning projects.
Have you written zoning ordinances?
I've written zoning ordinances, I've prepared comprehensive plans, kind of going both ways, implementing zoning as found in comprehensive plans, and then writing comprehensive plans and amendments to support the preparation of zoning ordinances that follow those plans.
But you've been qualified in the past as a planner or a community planner. That's your field, is that correct?
That's correct. I've also been qualified to testify numerous times as to fiscal and economic impacts.
Okay. Which is something that planners typically do when they're required under zoning ordinances.
Correct.
Is that right? So your degree is Master of Regional Planning. So I don't have an objection to him being qualified as a planner, but I'm not sure what the other areas were.
The
I mean,
request was to testify as an expert to render an opinion in land planning, regional planning, and community impact assessments.
I mean, I don't,
Well,
that's something that
that's-
planners do, I think.
That's the environmental and ecological impacts.
Well, I mean, I
statement
think a
that's
land
required here.
planner is competent and qualified to render an impact assessment. I don't know that there are experts in, or I don't know, maybe you do. Do you go out and tell people that you're an expert community impact assessment person?
It's not my typical title when
No.
I meet somebody in the
I mean,
street. but
if
Well,
he's
but that's-
otherwise qualified, he can express an opinion and file such an.
I understand. My point was that unlike some land planners, this witness is experienced, professionally experienced in this particular role of a land planner, namely the impact assessment reports that are required by municipalities.
Okay. Mr. Edelson, do you have any questions of the witness on his qualifications to testify as an expert?
No, we would accept him as an expert for the purpose and the boundaries that have been outlined. I mean, I see him, we would accept him as a land planning expert.
Okay.
We will, if necessary, reserve our right to object to anything that sort of exceeds that type of a role, considering the fact that there are financial and ecological issues that could be raised that might require expert testimony.
Okay. Does the Radnor Conservancy have any questions?
No, sir.
Ms. Morgan, any questions on qualifications?
I'm going to go whatever they're going.
Okay. Mr. or Mrs. Price, any questions on qualifications? Very good. All right, I find Mr. Hetzel to be qualified to render an expert opinion in the area of land planning and to submit the impact assessment called for under the ordinance.
Thank you. Mr. Hetzel, were you hired by the applicant to prepare any particular documents in this matter?
I was hired to prepare a report addressing the requirements of Section 280-100B-8 in the Township zoning ordinance, which is a statement of ecological and economic impacts.
And I'm showing you something that has been distributed as MT22. What is that?
That's a memorandum that I produced that represents that statement.
Okay. Would you please explain to the board what you did and then what conclusions you drew?
Okay, as I said, was retained to prepare a report addressing the ecological and economic impacts of the proposed development. And I reviewed the density modification yield plan, the proposed residential development plans, the engineered base maps. I also looked at soil mapping from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I looked at aerial photographs from the DVRPC, the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, and other online sources, Google Earth and Google Maps. I looked at floodplain mapping from FEMA, ran a search on the Pennsylvania Natural Diversity Index database, which might indicate the presence of sensitive plant or animal species or habitats. I also examined the township's budget documents, assessment information in the township, population data for the township and the school district. And I concluded that as compared to a by right plan that could be developed according to the underlying zoning, the proposed plan layout would have less impact to natural systems because it allows for more conservation of ecological resources and the preservation of environmental features on the site. I also concluded that the proposed plan would have more beneficial fiscal impacts to the township and to the school district. From the standpoint of public services and public education, I would expect that it would at least pay for itself, if not have a net positive fiscal impact to those agencies.
Now, Mr. Hetzel, starting with the first part of that, the environmental impact assessment, I've placed on the table in front of you sheet 5 of MT16, which is the plan set. Would you agree that that's the existing features plan?
That is the existing features plan, correct?
Okay. Is that the one you would use to describe the ecological conditions that you've identified in your report?
It is, and I would also add to that the examination of aerial photography and some field views as well to just understand the lay of the land.
Okay. I know that we've had Mr. Fiorello explain the various parts of the site. Does your report contain the natural features that you've analyzed?
It does. We have a narrative addressing certain aspects of the natural features, things like steep slopes, surface water features, floodplains, soils, sensitive species, woodland areas, and then also some discussion of open space and the stormwater management techniques that would be employed to ensure the environmental sustainability of the development.
Now, if you take that plan that's beside you and flip it back to the cover sheet, is that sheet 1, which is one of the two potential development, one of the, well, let me not fall into the trap of trying to say that there are only two, but does that show methods of development of the site, various siting of lots, so forth?
It does.
Open space proposed?
Correct, it does.
And would you flip to the next sheet? And is that the sheet that shows the other various alternatives?
That is.
And including the open space and the lots?
That is, yes.
Okay. And are those the two variations of development or the variations that are shown on those two sheets? Are those the methods that, or the forms of development that you've looked at to determine the impacts that would be caused or result from this development?
They are, and the sheet that is shown right now, I believe it shows the 87 lots, is the one that we considered, we gave greater weight to just in an effort to be more conservative, because it would represent the higher intensity development of the two.
Okay, so let's leave that one open instead of the other sheet. Did you then do an analysis of the economic impact of the site?
I did.
And how did you perform that?
I obtained budget documents from the township and the school district. I also obtained assessment information, it's land and property assessment information from the Delaware County, and population data for both the township and the school district. Using that background data, I applied an analytical methodology that's published by the Rutgers University Center for Urban Policy Research, which is considered to be an industry standard for fiscal impact analysis in my line of work. That methodology is built into a spreadsheet model that the university developed that's called the preview model, to which I've added some of my own supplemental tables to account for local sensitivity and enhancements to address local issues in Pennsylvania.
And what did you particularly study?
When we do these types of fiscal impact analysis, we usually look at the revenues that a proposed development could be expected to generate based on its market and assessed value characteristics and the population demographics. And understanding that revenues are usually coming mostly from real estate taxes, but we also consider other revenue sources based on details of the township. For instance, Radnor also has business and mercantile taxes that are a large revenue stream in their budget, as well as transfer taxes that come from the sale of real estate. Once we have a good understanding of what types of revenues proposed development might generate, we model the cost side of the equation based on per capita cost multipliers generated by our models, using information about how the township spends money today, as is described in their annual budget documents. So we take that number along with local population numbers and the mix of land uses in the township to come up with a residential cost multiplier per capita. So we can model what the cost profile would be based on the population generated by a particular type of development. So then subtracting costs from revenues, it shows us a net fiscal impact number that can either be negative or positive or neutral, actually, depending on the balance of revenues versus costs.
Would it be easier for you to walk through table one with the hearing examiner to explain your conclusions on this site?
I could.
Or would you prefer a different way?
I'd like to explain first a little bit how our study differed from our typical way of measuring revenues.
Sure.
First.
Sure.
In the case of the proposed development, the revenue calculation side of the equation is a little bit more difficult to measure just because we don't yet know what the market values of proposed homes will be. We weren't provided with that information because there's very unique factors that will dictate what those values will be. Although we do believe that they would have value characteristics that are similar to other new luxury type homes in the township and in surrounding communities, and that the values would likely be on the higher end of the value spectrum for those types of homes due to the types of luxury features that they would have and the unique site characteristics, site amenities like this unique and beautiful setting that it is in that would influence the value. So because of that, we approached the calculation of fiscal impact from the cost side. thinking that if we understand the cost profile of a typical four-bedroom home in Radnor Township, then we could infer the amount of tax revenue that a home would need to generate to offset those costs. So we started from the cost side and then figured that if we understood what the cost was, then we would at least have a basis for what the inferred assessed value would need to be.
Okay, and does that then take you to table one?
I could go to table one, yeah. That's-
Okay.
Table one is on the last page of Exhibit MT 22. And it shows two columns. One is our calculations for Radnor Township, and the other column is the calculation for the school district. And as we go down the rows, we explain how we get to our per capita cost per resident is from our model calculation based on the township expenditures. We understand from our demographic multipliers that there are 3.5 new residents per four-bedroom, single-family detached unit. There would be public school-age children per unit at the rate of 0.7854. That is included in the 3.5 persons per unit total. Moving down the rows, if you look at the per capita cost per resident, that's $962 per resident. That's based on the expenditures in the township's budget divided by population of the township, but adjusted for the fact that residential land uses have a different cost profile than non-residential land uses in the township. So we account for that in our model. Obviously, the per capita costs coming from an all-residential development like this are going to be based on the residential cost per resident number of $962. Typically, a non-residential land use would have a lower cost per capita. So this represents the higher number of the two that our model generates. To the public school side, getting to a per capita cost per public school-age child, we looked at the school district budget, general fund expenditures, and just divided that by the total enrollment of the school to arrive at a per student number of roughly $22,735 per student. So estimating annual cost to the township, you take row A, which is the new residents, times row C, which is the per capita cost, and that estimates per household $3,367 of cost to the township. And inferred in that is that's to provide all levels of service that are budgeted for in the township budget, for everything from snow plowing, general government, public safety, anything that is laid out in the millage-based funds of the local government. The estimated annual cost to the school district, similarly, we take the number of school-age children per household times the cost per student to arrive at a cost number of roughly $17,856 per household to the school district. Applying the tax rates, applying the tax rates to the annual cost, we calculate the assessed value that would be needed to offset that cost in the case of the school district to generate basically $3,367 of tax revenue. You would need an assessed value of $897,603. So that would be sort of the baseline assessment of a home that would need to, what a home would need to be to offset that value. If you were to try to come up with a estimated market value that equates to, we applied the Delaware County Common Level Ratio, which is a ratio that is set by the Pennsylvania Department of Taxation to understand what the ratio of market to assessed is. It's kind of a moving target, but it's really the only published multiplier we have for that.
You used 2013 or?
2013.
Okay.
It's valid, I think, from June to July
Right.
of the following year. That infers a market value per unit of approximately $1.2 million. Given the unique site factors and the characteristics of the homes that we understand to be proposed here, we think it's very reasonable to expect market values that are in excess of $1.2 million at this location. So our conclusion would be that the impact to the township would be at least neutral, but probably, more probably on the positive net fiscal side. Applying the same type of analysis to the school district, we wanted to see what the assessed value would need to be to offset $17,000 in costs. And that number came out to be a little lower, actually, $822,409, which infers a market value per unit of $1.14 million. Again, well within our value expectations for the types of homes that we proposed here.
Thank you. Mr. Etzel, that's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Rice, any cross?
A few questions. Just on this table, just so I understand, Mr. Hetzel, you took the township's general fund budget and divided it by the number of residents from what, the 2010 census?
Actually, I looked at the 2010 census. I actually looked at Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission numbers for 2010 and 2015, and the numbers are very similar there. So yeah, it was 2010, essentially 2010 census, correct. But there was also a bit of additional math involved in that, getting to that per capita number, because as I mentioned, our model accounts for the fact that there's a mix of land uses in the township, and not all of that expenditure amount is going to serve the residential population. There's got to be some measure for a portion of the township that is non-residential as well.
So how did you carve that out then?
It's actually done within the model, but the model calculates based on the number of residential parcels as classified by the Board of Assessment versus non-residential parcels. It also looks at the total value of residential parcels and the total value of non-residential parcels to establish a ratio of non-residential land use in the township. And then it allocates the division, if you'd, so to speak, of that expenditure number by the proportion of residential versus non-residential land uses in the township. I don't have the number in front of me of exactly what that is, but I believe it's, I can't say with certainty what the non-residential share of the township is, but.
Okay. But you allocated the township costs between residential and non-residential? Costs to
Well-
run the government, to provide services, you split them between the two, residential versus non-residential?
I only really looked at the residential.
Okay.
It generates 2 per capita multipliers, and seeing as we're only generating residential population, that's the only number I had to apply. But it does consider that in its calculation of what the cost is here.
Okay, so your numbers, though, at the end of the day on this, for each assuming 3.5 residents in each home, with your per capita cost, the annual cost for each of these homes then would be, to the township, would be $3,367 in taxes. Is that right?
That's the cost, and we assume that you would need to generate that amount of revenues to offset that. We only considered tax revenues. In reality, there would be other revenues generated as a result of this development. So,
Such as what? I mean, what-
business and mercantile taxes.
Why would there be a business or mercantile tax in a residential development?
It's my understanding that anytime a contractor does work in a house or any services are rendered, that a mercantile tax is paid on the value of those services. But we didn't include that in this calculation. We just considered taxes because of the difficulty with trying to ascertain what that number might be, what the business or mercantile tax number might be. We didn't include that in this calculation.
Okay. All right, well, but business and mercantile taxes would be on a business that's located in the township, correct?
Correct, but they would need to pay those taxes for rendering services as a result of this development.
Okay. You didn't look at the business and mercantile tax ordinance that the township has on its books, did you?
I did,
You did, okay.
and it appeared to me that they would need to pay taxes based on services there.
So you didn't crank that into the study, and service fees, which you said you didn't include.
Correct. If there's,
What types of service fees are you, would be payable to the township?
traffic violations, just by having additional population here. Anytime a false alarm occurs and police have to go to a home to respond, there's usually a fee associated with that.
Only on the second or third try, but
But we didn't.
pretty nominal, small amount of money, though. You would agree. correct?
I would agree, and that's,
Okay. So this is based on real estate taxes alone, and then what the value that the new homes would have to be in order to pay for itself, so to
Correct.
speak. Okay. The market value that you've estimated here, did you do any kind of market study of the area, or look at any recent sales or comparables in this immediate vicinity?
we didn't do a full market study. We did look at some of the sale value of homes in the area. Properties located on former portions of Ardrossan, namely in the area north of Newtown Road and west of Abram Lane. Assessed values there currently exceed $1.7 to $2 million in some homes.
How many homes did you look at there? More
I probably looked at maybe a dozen in the area. And it's really, as I said, we didn't do a full-blown market study. It's based on anecdotal knowledge, but I can attest to my experience working as a planner that there are many homes on many different sizes of lots, different sizes of homes that could exhibit very high value characteristics just based on their location, based on the types of finishes that are included in the homes, whether or not they're custom homes versus communities that are developed by a developer doing a limited number of similar models. My understanding of the type of home that's going to be developed here is that it would be more in line with the former that I mentioned, where it would be custom luxury homes that are in a very advantageous location, both regionally and the site itself, that would lend it to have, in my opinion, rather high values compared to some of the older housing stock even in Radnor Township.
Okay, on the numbers that you put together regarding the school district, your report indicates that the Center for Urban Policy Research estimates 1.02 school-aged children in the typical four-bedroom, single-family detached home in Pennsylvania. And you reduce that then from 1.02 down to 0.7854 children.
School-age children.
School-age children.
Public school-age children, correct.
Okay. But you reduced it from 1.02 down to that 0.7854 under the assumption that 23% of the school-age children residing in Radnor Township, and I assume in this development, would attend schools other than public schools, private schools. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
We did not account for the fact that it's likely that many of these homes will be empty nesters or second homes for people that may or may not spend their entire year here. They may be seasonal homes that they're here for parts of the year.
I mean, you have no way of knowing that until they're sold and occupied, right? So, correct?
Correct. I have no way of knowing for certain, but I can say based on the types of homes that we've seen developed that are in this similar type of realm, that is the sort of population profile that exists in many of these types of homes.
So the number then, the cost to the school district, and this is just strictly, and again, I guess, I'm trying to understand how you arrived at the per capita cost. Did you take the school district's general fund budget and just divide it to come up with 17,856?
I actually took the general fund budget, divided it by the school enrollment,
Okay.
which the general fund budget, I believe, was $82,710,641, divided by total enrollment of 3,638 students. That gives you that per student number of 22,735. Multiplying that by the 0.7854 students per house gets us to 17,856 in cost per house.
And what is the total school enrollment you just testified to is for elementary through high school Radnor School District students only, correct?
Correct. Public schools.
Right, I understand that. And then the similar, in order to pay for that, it's your view that that estimated market value per unit would generate sufficient real estate taxes to cover those costs. Is that right?
Correct.
The other parts of your report deal with natural features that are on the site. Steep slopes, which you haven't done any study yourself on. You're just referencing what has been done by the applicant's civil engineer, correct?
Correct.
The same with the stormwater management and the floodplain information. That, you haven't done any of that yourself, have you?
Floodplain, I looked at the FEMA firm maps, which are the controlling legal authority for determining flood
But
at
you-
this time.
But you haven't done any flooding studies or impacts of stormwater runoff or impacts on the streams of any?
I have not. I relied on work of others for that, for this report.
Okay, and the soils on page, you have a reference to the type of soils that are there. Do you know what class soils they are? Glenelg series?
They are the Glenelg series.
I mean, soils-
They're not classified as hydric soils. I don't know the hydrologic classification, other than they're not classified as hydric, which means they're unlikely to exhibit wetland characteristics if they're not hydric. They tend to be deep, well-drained soils that are characteristic of upland areas and are suitable for building in general.
Do you know whether they're classified as agricultural soils?
I do not know their agricultural classification.
The sensitive species or habitats, you've basically, I mean, you haven't done any kind of a study out there yourself, correct? You're reporting what's been done by the applicant's engineer, or have you? Have you done any?
No, I've not done any. To my knowledge, there haven't been detailed studies done yet. That's typically something that gets done more at the land development application phase of the project. Conditional use phase, we typically look at it sort of from a higher level view to ascertain what could be out there.
Okay, so we're talking about plants and or animals, correct, on the site?
Correct.
That would be something that would have to be determined either through the, I guess, the Fish and Wildlife or DCNR in terms of any type of sensitive species or habitat.
Correct. I did run a Pennsylvania National Diversity Index report on their online database system. I input the extent of the site into their system, which is often used as a screening tool to determine whether or not additional reporting is necessary. The PINDY Environmental Review System reported that there were no known impacts detected that would require a review by the Pennsylvania Game Commission. There were no known impacts that would require a review by the Fish and Boat Commission, and there would be none required by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It did identify potentially that there's one plant special concern species, but that would need to be further investigated. Didn't specify what that is, if it certainly exists, or where it might exist.
And that would have to be developed further during subdivision land development review.
Correct,
right?
and that's customarily would be done anyway at that time.
Mr. Hetzel, you have a comment about woodlands. How do you define woodlands? Do you have a definition of woodlands? Is it a certain number of acres, certain number of trees, certain diameter?
I think it could be defined differently depending on what jurisdiction you're in and how performance standards may be measured by that jurisdiction. In general, we looked at wooded areas that are clearly stands of trees that are together, mostly on the subject property. They're areas located along the stream valleys. We wouldn't consider a lone tree in a field a woodland, but more so groups of tree stands that together comprise a landscape characteristic that, from an aerial photograph or from a standing on the field, exhibits characteristics of a woodland insofar as
so-
trees together.
So it has to have some kind of continuous canopy?
That
One or
would-
two trees in the middle of the field would not be considered woodlands, in your view?
In my view, it would not.
Do you know how many acres of woodlands, using that definition, are on this site?
I think it was testified to previously that there's 50 or so acres of wooded areas on the site.
That's your estimate from prior testimony?
Correct.
Is that right? I mean, you haven't done any study or mapped this out on your own, have you?
Well, I've studied it insofar as I've looked at how the development is laid out with respect to those woodlands or tree areas as shown on the site, and have concluded that the site plan is laid out in a manner that mostly avoids areas such as woodlands, stream corridors, steep slopes, and other environmentally sensitive features. So I didn't feel for this type of report it was really necessary to look at the woodlands that weren't being affected by the proposed development.
Did you, you're a planner, did you have any hand in laying out this plan?
I did not.
Do you know if there's any wetlands on the site?
None that I'm aware of, but I'm not sure that any investigations have been done.
I mean, that would, again, that's something that would have to be developed during the subdivision land development.
Correct. I can say if there are wetlands based on the soil characteristics of the site, they're probably limited to the areas in and around the streams on the site, which are, again, the development areas avoid disturbing those features anyway.
I don't have any other questions for Mr. Hetzel.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mr. Edelson?
Yeah. Mr. Hetzel, with regard to your expertise as a planner and your opinion with regard to this particular development, one of the things you stated in your report under economic impacts happens to refer to a well-designed development to capitalize on beautiful views and scenic vistas. And I think you expressed it as this is an excellent opportunity for that. Is that fair?
Yes.
And also, with regard to this conditional use hearing, you're aware of the fact that one of the requirements is somehow showing what the ecological impact, especially as to the surrounding areas, might be. Did you do any investigation with regard to what, in terms of this proposed development, what impact it would have on the adjacent properties surrounding this?
I didn't see it having any ecological impacts to, I saw it as having minimal ecological impacts to the subject property, and as a result, minimal or less than that ecological impacts in the surrounding areas.
So you're saying that if in fact a development with that statement has very little ecological impact on its own site, that it would not have by nature an impact on surrounding properties?
In the case of this proposal, I would say that. I can't say, it probably varies by design, from design to design, but the way this site is
Specifically
laid
with
out.
regard to this particular proposed development.
Correct.
Did you do any investigation of surrounding areas? I think you're aware of the fact that one of the major assets of this proposed development are its view sheds. Are you familiar with that?
I am, but I wouldn't classify that as an ecological impact.
But it is an important factor in this development.
Views are certainly an important part of the site, and I think the design attempts to incorporate views and sensitivity to the placement of development on those views.
Okay, now with regard to off-site impact, did you do any investigation with regard, same issue, to its impact on off-site?
With regard to,
Surrounding properties, adjacent properties. Properties that might have view sheds that are excellent now that might not have them when this is completed.
I didn't do view shed analysis from other
Okay,
properties.
That's fine. Okay. I have no further questions, Mr. Ball.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from the Conservancy?
No, sir.
Okay, very good. Ms. Morgan? Sir, could you have a seat over there? Sure.
Hello. Hi, Leslie Morgan, 12 Farm Road. I am probably math handicapped here in your world, and I may have some questions. I may actually want you to come and do the math for the whole audience on, I have an idea. If we could. When I look at the two columns and you went through them, I want to make sure that the $3,367 is what you've proposed, that each house on the 87 on this plan is what it's going to cost per house in township fees. Have I got that right? It's going to cost the township $3,367
That's
on an annual basis per house.
That's the profile that a typical four-bedroom house in Radnor Township the burden that it, I don't want to say burden, the cost profile to the township that a typical four-bedroom house, single-family detached house has today based on the population dynamics and the spending that the township does today.
Did it take into consideration any specific speciality on this particular application?
I don't know that I understand the question. What would be a specific?
Well, that they're asking the taxpayers to fund a $20 million open space purchase on that corner.
Objection. That has nothing to do with this application.
It most certainly does, sir.
Well,
It's a
that's-
cost to the township.
May have something to do with the application, but I don't know if it has anything to do with this witness's testimony. Are you familiar
I
with
thought he was
that?
an economic
I'm
expert.
sorry. First of all, ma'am, only one person can speak at a time.
Sure.
Okay? So are you familiar with that aspect of this?
I'm familiar with it, but I'm not familiar with the
right.
details of it.
Okay, we'll allow a little leeway here. Go ahead, Ms. Morgan.
Okay. Your expertise is in planning and economic impact, I think you said, and ecological impact, correct?
Correct.
If there was a special feature on any of those three, meaning economic impact, that was different than in other subdivisions typically, would that be a factor?
Again, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by a special feature.
Well, if there is a burden on this application that is unusual, that's a hardship to the township in terms of incurring debt, that is very different than most subdivisions or applications, would that be included in your cost per unit? Or could it be? Could it mathematically be included?
I don't know how I would include it into that cost per unit. I haven't done that here.
Well, if it were, let's say, $1 million divided by 87, could you do that math?
You could do that math.
I forgot my calculator and my battery's running down because I was thinking that you could do it. But if there's a hardship that's very different, isn't that something that would be included, that's unusual in a township cost? Because this township may incur a very unusual feature on a cost per household on this site.
I didn't include that in my analysis because I wasn't aware of the details of it.
Okay, and if the details became public, you could do that math.
Certainly.
Thank you. Some other questions. Are you familiar with any density modification subdivisions or applications in Radnor Township? Have you worked on any?
I've not worked on any other density modification applications in Radnor.
Have you worked on any density modification applications in any townships or counties in Pennsylvania?
Under different names, probably. I've worked on other types of plans that attempt to cluster or use alternatives to conventional development.
Okay. So I find that a lot of the zoning codes are pretty similar township to township if they're in the same general vicinity. And you had mentioned that, I'll come back to density modification and your expertise, but you had mentioned that ecologically, that density modification on this site and this particular plan of 87 homes was, you thought, the best financially and ecologically, economically, ecologically, and it fit the site, correct?
Compared to the conventional development type pattern that I think could go here, yes.
That's what I wanted to ask you. So you're aware that it's 2-acre, underlining 2-acre zoning per unit, correct?
Yes.
Have you been able to, and did you study a 2-acre plan on this site?
I didn't. I studied the density modification yield plan. I've also looked at other ways that this could get done with much higher density than is proposed here.
What was that way that you studied that was much higher
Well,
yield?
the yield plan says there could be in excess of 160 units, I
Yep,
believe.
167.
So there are many ways you could design a development on this piece of ground that would avail the applicant of much higher density that would result in much greater disturbance of area, much greater disturbances of the scenic vistas, closer proximity of development to sensitive environmental features than are shown on this plan. It could result in lower market values because you'd be developing a different type of unit. Overall, the impacts from a higher intensity, higher density overall type development could be not as beneficial as what's being proposed.
Okay, a few things on that. Thank you very much. In the 167 maxed out density modification, what would be the required open space acreage on this site?
I'm not positive of that because I haven't studied, I didn't model it and I didn't study it in detail.
Would it be more acreage than is proposed with this plan?
I don't know.
Did you read the zoning codes of the density modification under Radnor Township?
I was preparing not a site plan, I prepared an ecological and economic impact study related to the proposed development,
And
not
this,
to a,
thank you, and this application has 15% of the tract size, correct?
15% shown because that's what's required.
Right.
I would say that much more of the areas that are not shown as formal open space will function as open space and in effect will be much more beneficial than a site that is developed under conventional development pattern, which would lot every square inch of this property out in lots.
Okay, it is lotted out, as we see. The white stuff is called investment lots. It is totally lotted out. What we have here is in the green shading is our, in this application, is white. They're called investment lots, and they are fully developable. We've been told this. But
Mr. Bowler,
I don't have a
I'm not-
question.
excuse-
I do have a question.
But I have the right to object right
Okay,
now?
sorry.
Okay. I think we're way, way, way out of the scope of this
No,
witness's
I
testimony.
don't think so, not yet.
Okay.
You can tell me if I am.
I will.
problem. Okay, thank you. No problem. What I'm trying to get at is two things. There is 15% required with this application. It is the minimum requirement to pass the threshold in Radnor Township. 15% of 311 is how many acres? I mean, you studied the site. How many acres of common open space?
40, I'm being told it's 46.7.
46.7. So what I'm trying to let you know when you said that there would be greater disturbance with greater density, that I think the number is 42% you can get up to open space if you go to the max. And so is 42% greater than 15% of open space on this tract?
That one, if you're going to object, I would sustain.
I'll
I'll tell
object.
you why. You've mixed apples and oranges there.
Okay. You have testified that this is the best plan for this site.
Objection, that's not what he testified.
No, he testified that in his opinion, this site was better economically and ecologically
Okay.
than a by right plan that would be lotted into 2-acre lots.
Okay. In the by right plan that you have not seen lotted in, how can you tell if you've never seen it? When this is fully lotted out with 15%.
It's not fully lotted out with 15%.
Well,
It's
no,
fully
I-
lotted out. I object to that because it has no basis in the ordinance. There's
No,
not a by right with 15% open space.
Overruled. It was a pretty simple question, really, that really brings a simple answer, I think.
Could you repeat that, please?
You have me nervous now. This plan, this
If
application.
you've never seen it lotted out, how did you determine that it was better
Yes, if
this
you-
way than lotted out, was your question?
If you've
I think.
never seen it lotted out on a 2-acre by right plan in Radnor, under Radnor Township codes, how would you say that this is better? If you haven't seen a sketch plan or a,
My experience in planning such types of development is if you were to lot it out, you would lot it out so you would get the maximum yield that you can get under that type of an option. And the amount of site disturbance associated with getting houses into every 2-acre portion of the lot would likely result in having more roads, more construction activity, less flexibility to site where those houses are than if you were to cluster. The whole reason why you do clustering is to avoid areas that are environmentally sensitive and to focus development on areas of the lot that are most appropriate for development.
And in cluster development, is it typically a centralized cluster, or in one area and then they leave a lot open on another area?
That's on a site-by-site basis. It can be, I've seen it done many ways. It all depends on the individual site and where constraints and opportunities to development are on a site.
On your you did testify that you've done some density modification, correct? But in other townships or?
I've done cluster-type plans. I've worked on such
Okay.
plans.
In your cluster plans, have you done any along the main line?
Trying to think of what classifies as main line, but
For me, that's a good question for me, because people have said I don't define it. I take it from sort of like the train line, all the way out to maybe Malvern.
I've done East Goshen, I've done Malvern Borough,
Cluster.
cluster or multifamily development, higher density development. I'm trying to think, East Whiteland Township. I guess my question is, what
In
is the
Malvern,
question?
in the development that you worked, did you do, and you did cluster development, were the clusters in all different places all over the
Well-
entire tract?
I wouldn't say Malvern, but I have worked in other townships where cluster has been in different portions of a large tract.
Okay.
Not unusual to see that, Mr. Moore.
Okay, so, that's fine. Are you familiar with Brook Farm? I think it's a pretty close proximate to what these houses may or may not look like.
I'm not.
Okay, it's pretty close. And you said that your school factor is less than 1 because a lot of kids are going to go to private school?
On average, across the entire development, it is less, there's public school-age children. That's not to say there aren't children of the people that live there that are not, that are older than school age, or that don't attend public schools, or that are younger than school age.
And have you checked that in any development in this ward?
Not in this ward, but I can say that my population multipliers that I have checked against numerous other developments, some in Radnor. I did a
Which
study
development would that be?
in Verary. I'm not going to say for this study, but
Mm-hmm.
I have looked at the population profiles of my multipliers as they relate to many developments in the area, and they, in my opinion, represent an accurate estimation of the population of the types of development that we're talking here.
When you take into factor your factors, and I'm winding up, do you ever consider new construction versus an Inverary that has been around for 35 years and, you know, some people buy and then they stay forever, and so they grow their families up and the demographics of that particular might change. That's why I picked Brook Farm. It's sort of more recent than what you just mentioned.
I could say I've looked at Applebrook and East Goshen, and there were fewer than, I think, a half a child per unit. That was new development.
Applebrook with a lot of carriage homes that's on the golf course?
There's some carriage homes, there's some, I think there's a few singles out there, and there's a mix of types of units, but they're large carriage homes, larger than many singles are in other parts of the township.
Right. We're told that carriage homes in Radnor are targeted to 55 and over, just to let you know. We've been through this a lot. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Price? Thank you. Mr. Price?
Brian Price from Atterbury. You're trying to say that 3.5 people per house. I mean, where did you come up with those figures?
We use demographic multipliers that were published by the Rutgers University Center for Urban Policy Research that are based on the United States Census public use microdata sample of the American Community Survey that are specific to the state of Pennsylvania, specific to the housing type. They model it by single-family detached, single-family attached, rental units, condo units, and by the number of bedrooms. So it's, as far as we're concerned, they're probably the most reliable, academically vetted numbers that we have at our disposal.
So that formula is a local, like your, say, Delaware County or Chester Counties where you came up with that?
I've checked it on occasions to local projects, and I've found it to be consistent with local patterns.
Okay. And you keep giving appraisals for these houses? Are you an MAI, like a housing appraiser?
It's not an appraisal. It's a ratio of assessed to market value based on the common level ratio published by the Pennsylvania Department of Taxation.
I'm trying to figure out, have you done any studies on how much space is left in the schools around here to stick all these kids in there? If we have to build a new school, a high school, grammar school, middle school?
We didn't do that as part of this study, but we looked at what the cost would be per student.
What, if a student's going to cost, based on, you knocked it down from 22.7 down to 17.8 thousand.
That's
Per
cost
kid.
per household, not per kid. That's per household.
So,
Because
and you're
there's-
basing it on one kid per household?
You have to look at on average across the development. It's .7854 school-age kids per household on average across the 87 homes.
Okay. How much, what would the taxes be on this $1.2 million house to the owner?
3,367.
3,000? I'll take that house.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's the. No, that's to the
Can I have the
township.
2-acre lot?
No, that's to the township. I'm sorry. That's the township tax. The cost would, on a $1.143 million house, would be $17,856, which is the school district portion of the analysis.
Do you, like, if you're paying, what was your figure?
17,856.
Let's just round up to 17,000. If you pay 17,000, do you know how much this township receives out of that money?
Well,
What
they would.
percentage of the township
That's
gets that?
that's just the school district's millage.
Well, give me the combined, because
Well,
we have to
looked at
pay all
it
the
as,
bills.
we looked at it at the minimum number that the house would need to be assessed at in order to offset the cost to each, the township or the school district. I guess if I was to say on a $1.2 million house at the millage rate, you apply that 21.7122 mils to it, that would give you, it'd probably be in the neighborhood of 22,000
Okay, and then,
per house total.
yeah, that's what I need, the total figure that that the tax is gonna be everybody, that's the school tax, everything. And then, do you know the percentage that the Radnor Township actually gets out of that figure?
Well, they get 3.7511 mils. I know that much.
The total number, let's just round it up to 20, if we pay $20,000 in taxes, do you know how much that the township actually receives of that money?
Probably about $3,000 of that.
18% of it. 18%. It's you're short.
Questions, Mr. Price?
You can't,
Question.
The question is, his sheet isn't accounting for what the township is actually receiving to pay for these kids to go to school.
The township doesn't educate the students.
The school district
does.
receives those funds, not the township.
Yeah, but the township gets 18% of that, of the total figure.
Okay?
There's a board out in the hallway that says that.
Okay.
Like the county gets like 68% of this money.
Again, we're not into a question. Mr. Price obviously doesn't understand that
No.
there is a number on this sheet that is exactly what the township
Yeah,
will
the
get. It has
township's-
nothing to do with percentages.
Township gets $3,367 if there is a house that's worth
Yeah,
$1,247,000.
but they have to educate a child for 17,000.
No.
Oh.
Listen, the township is one entity. School district does the educating. The township has the police and the roads and the buildings and all of this.
Okay.
Okay, two different places.
Well, that was all I had, other than like evaluating the schools and to see if they have the room to take all these children in without
He said he
without
didn't,
building.
and
Right.
he said he didn't do that. Thank you, sir.
That's part of the economic part of this program.
Yep. Thank you, sir. All right, any redirect, sir?
Yeah, real quick.
Okay.
Mr. Hetzel, just so I'm sure, what you're saying is there would be a little less than 0.8 of a school-age kid per house?
Public school age
Public
kid.
school-age kid. And at 87 units, that would be 0.8 times 87 would be the total number of school kids
Correct,
over 13 grades?
correct.
Okay. In your head, quickly, something less than 6 per grade?
That sounds about right, yeah.
And lastly, from the standpoint of off-site views into our property, giving credence for some reason to the assumption that somebody off-site has a right to a view into our property. The plans that are shown on sheets 1 and 2 here, would the off-site view into our property be enhanced or decreased by having these plans in place of a by right lotted plan lotting out the whole property?
I think these plans would enhance it over a by right lotted, entirely lotted out tract under conventional development pattern.
I have no other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rice.
Nothing further.
Mr. Edelson,
No, nothing further.
Conservancy. Ms. Morgan. Ms. Price, Mr. Price. Okay. You done?
We're done.
Oh, Ms. Morgan has questions?
Nope, I'm getting my.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard you say no, and then I saw you walking up, so,
Ms. Bola, I would like to call Mr. Scott back for one question.
okay?
Actually, it's one little series of questions. I don't
I've
want to get
never
caught with one
heard a
question.
lawyer yet who said they'd call for one question and been able to limit themselves to one, so don't break that chain of.
Mr. Scott, you're still under testimony, under oath. What is your profession?
I'm a real estate developer.
Are you a realtor?
I am a realtor.
Are you experienced in valuing houses for sale, the expectancy of prices of houses in a community like this?
Yes.
Were you involved in the valuing of the properties in Ardrossan 1 and 2?
Yes.
Have you an opinion as the developer and as a realtor as to the expected value of the properties in this project with respect to Mr. Hetzel's testimony that in order to break even, those houses would have to have a value of approximately $1.248 million?
Well, I feel confident that they'll have values that are significantly higher than that.
Is that what your pricing for the project has been based on? Your budgeting for the project has been based on?
My budgeting is based on higher pricing expectations.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Rice, any questions on that?
Yeah, just, so you're expecting the homes and the lots to sell for more than 1.2 million, is that correct?
Yes, I am. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Nothing else?
Mr. Edelson?
No.
Conservancy? Ms. Morgan? Ms. Price? Mr. Price? Okay,
Thank you.
all right, very good. We are at 10 of 10. The hearing officer's getting grumpy. So we're going to conclude the hearing for this evening. Will you have further witnesses to present?
I don't anticipate further witnesses, and therefore I think the opponents should be, or the
Okay.
other party should be prepared to go forward.
All right, is the township going to present any witnesses, Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess the township will go next.
Well, I'm
wanna have
going
Mr.
to
Edelson?
discuss that with Mr. Edelson.
All right, one of the
See how
two
we
of
wanna
you
proceed
will
either
decide
way.
to go next.
That's fine.
Okay, and be prepared to occupy 3.5 hours of our time.
And I would suggest that other parties also be prepared to have witnesses in case there's time.
Yeah, if you, other parties should begin planning. It's difficult, obviously, I think you can tell. It's hard to judge how long these things would take. One of the lawyers told me tonight we'd be done in an hour. So you see how this goes. But if, I don't know, who's next up? The Conservancy probably ought to think about being ready to present your testimony at the next hearing. I'm going to suspect that Rice is going to have a witness or two. You're going to have
Probably three,
probably three.
maybe more.
There'll probably be less cross-examination because the number of parties cross-examining will be fewer. But you better be ready to go. Ms. Morgan, I guess you would just be testifying, wouldn't you?
Well, I was thinking of having, I mean, I've asked some people, I don't know if I'm allowed.
Well, we'll make that determination when you try to present someone. I don't want you paying for somebody to come out here if you don't have to, is my...
You know, we're so lucky, we're rural, we have wonderfully, incredible people that live in Radnor Township.
Okay, so you might want to be prepared with one. We may not get to that one witness, but I'm thinking by the time these two guys and their witnesses get done, I don't think the Conservancy is going to take that long. You might be ready with at least one witness. So that gives you a kind of a outline of where we are. Again, keep in mind, we have 2 more hearings scheduled. If we need more than that, we'll schedule them. We hope to get it done in 2 hearings, however, and they are November 14th and 21st. And we'll see you back here at 6:30 p.m. on the 14th. Thank you so much for your participation.